Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If I started every show for the next few days, obviously I'm not here for the weekend, but bear with. If I started every show for the foreseeable with the opening bars of "I Got You, Babe" by Sonny and Cher, would you get the reference? Would you know what that was nodding towards? I'll leave it hanging. We are, of course, discussing the single most important political event to befall this nation arguably since the Suez Crisis. Certainly in peacetime, it's a contender for the most important political event ever. And in peacetime, not including wars. And of course, what's most astonishing about it is that every single pace, every step has been plotted in advance, right up until today, when Theresa May, having failed to do all the things that she, I think deep down knew she wasn't going to be able to do, will try to blame it all on the European Union that we voted to leave. And a speech in Grimsby, if early reports are to be believed, will seek to pin the blame for any failure that occurs on Tuesday when the... I mean, it's actually breathtaking now in its absurdity. Have you seen what Karen Bradley, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, has said today? She goes, I mean, this is... I'm going to get the words absolutely right, actually, because I think a few years ago I'd have applauded this for its honesty. There's something quite refreshing about the absolute refusal to attempt anything that you could be described as traditional politics. She's gone all in. She said, "I want to be very clear. I do not believe what I said. This is not my view." I think 10 years ago, even possibly 3 years ago, I would have applauded that. I'd have said, you know what we need? We need more politicians standing up in public when they've done a boo-boo and saying, categorically, I've done a boo-boo. But when you actually see it in black and white, you begin to understand why politicians generally avoid doing that like the plague, because it makes them look absolutely ridiculous. I want to be very clear. I do not believe what I said. That is not my view. There have been 4 Secretary of States for Northern Ireland since David Cameron became Prime Minister in 2010. And Karen Bradley, astonishingly, is only the 3rd worst. Could you imagine that? A Secretary of State for Northern Ireland who manages to insult pretty much everybody in the provinces and, well, everybody on the island of Ireland, and then says, I want to be very clear, I do not believe what I said, that is not my view. And yet, with Owen Paterson and Theresa Villiers in the field, she's only ever going to come in 3rd when it comes to the most useless Northern Ireland Secretary, well, possibly in living memory, I don't know. Talking a lot about living memory, aren't we? Because, of course, Brexit is the stupidest thing any country has ever done voluntarily in living memory. There is no precedent for a country voluntarily imposing economic sanctions on itself, voluntarily compromising its own security, voluntarily hurting its own economy, voluntarily jettisoning jobs and money, voluntarily withdrawing itself from various agencies and institutions designed to protect and promote the interests of British people. No country in history has ever voluntarily done any of these things. Even when you look at the ugliest political movements that democracies have ever delivered, there was a perverse and warped logic to the voluntary decision to elect Adolf Hitler, for example. The appeal to rancid self-interest and the scapegoating of minorities does work. You can see why, because you tell someone you are going to be better off. But Brexit hasn't happened yet, and they've already had to abandon that tactic of extremism through the ages. They're not even now saying you're going to be better off. They're saying you're going to be worse off, and you're so stupid, we're going to be able to convince you to pretend that you knew all along that you were going to be worse off. I don't think you're stupid. The people who think they can persuade you that you knew all along you were going to be worse off, they're the ones that think you're stupid. It's up to you who is proved right. Me, who doesn't think you're stupid, or them, who think you're so stupid that by the end of tea time on Tuesday, you'll be claiming that you wanted to be poorer all along and that jobs are a luxury that you're quite happy to do without in order to teach the younger generation an important lesson in survival skills. And then, as I think it might have been as late as October 2016, when I first told you that this would end with the British government desperately trying to blame the European Union for the self-inflicted pain of Brexit. It took me about 8 weeks, I think, to work that out, that it had to end like this, maybe a little later. And today, Theresa May will attempt to blame the European Union for the looming disaster of Brexit. I think I might go home now. There's actually nothing else to say. There's no arguments to be had. That is what she's going to do today. Do you want to know the shaft of sunlight that has shone into my understandings of the issue? I don't want to sound arrogant, but after talking about it almost uninterrupted for almost 3 years, I'm slightly surprised that things can still surprise me. I'm not anymore surprised by the surprise of discovering people can be even dafter and more deluded than they are already. That's become a daily occurrence. There clearly is no bottom to this well of daftness and delusion. It's infinite. The scope of delusion is infinite for these people. But I'm still surprised by nuggets of understanding that I've missed. Nuggets of understanding that I've either glossed over or perhaps not been on the ball enough to appreciate. And that is one of the reasons why I enjoy social media so much, because if you curate your feed carefully, you can confine your interactions almost exclusively to interesting and or intelligent people. And one of those, I think deserving of both epithets, interesting and intelligent, pointed out to me this morning. My apologies in advance if this has been blindingly obvious to you all along. It hasn't been blindingly obvious to me. I can't quite understand why it's come as such a surprise. You know how this idea of walking away without a deal has somehow ended up in the British media being seen as a tactic in our possession? I explained to you yesterday why that is ridiculous. Again, there's no real argument. When people say, in every negotiation you've got to be prepared to walk away, they completely miss the point that in every other type of negotiation, when you walk away, you go back to what you had before. You do not go back to oblivion, to year dot, to zero, to nothing. If you walk away from the car dealership, having decided not to buy the new car, you go home in your old car. You don't walk out with no car and no keys and just go, ha-ha, freedom! You just don't do that. No, I don't get tired of pointing this out, actually, because it's so funny how daft and deluded the people who can't see it must now be. You know, imagine being an estate agent. You've got your house that you currently live in, and you're negotiating over the possibility of buying a new one, and you offer, I don't know, £600,000, and the estate agent says, well, they're hanging on for 610. And you say, right, well, I'm walking away. But I'm not going home. Oh, no. No. I've burnt down my home. That was what I did before I arrived here to negotiate with you about buying a new home. I burnt down my old home. So where are you going to walk away to then? Freedom! Got no home. Speaking of homelessness, my friend Aaron is the featured vendor in The Big Issue this week. So wherever you are in the country, if you can buy a copy of The Big Issue, you can see my mate Aaron, who is, I've got to be honest with you, he's probably the most inspiring person I know at the moment, and he sleeps under a bridge. There's something about his optimism and his ability to see the good, see the light, and there is now, hopefully, some serious light at the end of his personal tunnel. But if you do see him personally today outside the English National Opera on St Martin's Lane here in London's fashionable West End, then do buy a copy of the magazine from him. Don't tell him I told you this, but he was signing one this morning. He was actually doing a signed copy, which was really cool. Not as daft as Wayne in Basildon, who's now been asked to sign 4 copies of my book, which frankly takes the notion of celebrity signings to a ludicrous level. We digress. We have to. You've got to look for the fun and the frolics in life when the reality, the current affairs diet, is so unrelentingly bleak. Here's the question, 0345 6060973. Here's a text from Richard. It's the bullying tactics of the EU, exactly why we voted to leave O'Brien. Blindingly obvious, O'Brien. Richard there demonstrating just how deep this daftness and delusion runs, because the EU agreed to our deal. Theresa May put together a deal, asked the EU to agree to it, and they did. And now she is saying, why can't I get the deal that I concocted and you agreed to through my own parliament? It's all your fault. And people like Richard are on board with believing that nonsense. I feel nothing but love for you, Richard, in a Christian way, you know, in the same way that you feel love for the lepers outside the the castle begging, mate, how can you be so stupid after so long? The EU are not bullying anybody. They haven't budged an inch since they began explaining what the rules are and why they can't be broken, but they did budge quite considerably on the question of the British border in Ireland, the so-called backstop. They've done what they didn't want to do in order to help Theresa May get it through Parliament. And today she will stand up in Grimsby and treat the country like mugs, because she will say herself that the reason they can't get the deal through Parliament is because the European Union isn't doing enough to help. It's almost as if she never said those words about the Irish border in the days immediately prior to the referendum vote. Again, opening bars of I Got You, Babe by Sonny and Cher. She knew herself. She still does. So either she's lying today or she was lying back then. I'll give you a clue. She wasn't lying back then. My question for you today, I think, is... And I'll take Richard's text as a launch pad for this, because I don't think Richard is as lonely as he should be. I mean, politically, he's probably quite lonely in real life. But politically, I don't think he's as lonely as he should be. I think a lot of people are going to buy this, because you kind of have to, right? So let's not argue about Brexit, necessarily, he says, 10:14. Fairly confident that promise won't even last until 20 past. Because the way I frame this question already offends you. I think, if you voted leave. No, not if you voted leave. That's a stupid thing to say. If you still believe it was a good idea to vote leave. I want to know whether it's going to work for you. Are you now... You see, how can I phrase this question? Are you so deluded and so stubborn and so married to your own wrong-headedness that you're going to let Theresa May pretend that this is the European Union's fault, and you're even going to go along with her like Richard has? So what is it? Is it a lack of intelligence, a lack of understanding, or just a lack of honesty? That's probably not the best way to phrase the question. Are you stupid, dishonest, or dumb? No, option 4, all of the above. So, no, that's not going to work at all. That's far too uninviting. Let's just do it this way. Do you think it will work? Theresa May's lie today that this failure of the British government to get the British Parliament to agree to the deal put together by the British government and reluctantly agreed to by the European Union, is it going to work when she tries to argue, as she will today in Grimsby, that the reason why the British government can't get the British Parliament to agree to a deal signed off by the British government and reluctantly agreed to by the European Union is all the European Union's fault? I've got a horrible feeling it will work, because I have spent nearly 3 years waiting for the penny to drop, waiting for the entire crowd to acknowledge the nudity, the nakedness of the Emperor. 3 years. I don't think it's going to happen. Not through any normal sense. And when it does finally happen, it will be an act of national denial, the likes of which have never been seen before. It will be the opposite of Woodstock. You know how shortly after Woodstock, and for years subsequently, everybody claimed that they'd been there? They sometimes estimate that if everybody who attended the Woodstock Festival, if everyone who claimed to have attended the Woodstock Festival had actually attended the Woodstock Festival, then America would have sunk under the weight of all those bodies. Brexit will be the opposite of that. Give it 2 years, and apart from the people who have plastered their grimy little faces all over the public consciousness in the political and media spheres, give it a couple of years, no one will admit to ever having voted for it in the first place. Seriously, watch this space. 0345 606 0973. And that's why I think it will work. I think Theresa May today knows exactly what she's doing. She's saying things she knows to be untrue, but she's watched Brexit unfold, and she knows people would rather be lied to if it gives them a free pass on their own culpability for this act of incredible stupidity. They'd rather be lied to again than admit the truth of their own error. And that, my friends, is your starter for 10. Almost have to have... This is one of the problems with emojis, isn't it? And Twitter, is that you can't tell when people are being sarcastic or not. There's some confusion about my introduction. Karen Bradley really did say, I didn't believe what I said during her apology for saying that the murders of civilians by British troops during the Northern Irish Troubles were not crimes because they were the security services, or they were the army, or something like that. Theresa May today will attempt to blame the European Union for the British government's failure to get the British government's deal reluctantly agreed to by the European Union through the British Parliament. Do you think she'll be able to pull it off? Will it work? Will it wash? And we'll look under all the relevant rocks today. Steve's in Northampton. Steve, do you think it will work?
I don't think so, James. Good morning.
Why not?
Well, because she doesn't have any credibility at all, does she? In any sphere, with her own party, with the country, with anyone.
She won the confidence vote, didn't she? That Jacob Rees-Mogg brought.
yeah, she did. What was the other option, really?
Well, losing.
Yes, but
mate, come on, mate. I can't do everything. What do you want me to do? Cut your fish fingers up as well. So tell me why she's going to lose. Why she's not going to successfully portray the European Union as the reason why Brexit's proving so disastrous.
It's not their fault, is it? She's gone over there with a band of little negotiators who have been absolutely woeful in every area.
But they got the European Union.
They got wanted.
Fantastic. So you think, of course, you're a Brexiter, right?
I am.
Yes. So you want to blame her?
I do want to blame her.
I completely missed that. I'm so glad you're up first, because with the greatest of respect, everybody who said it was going to go well is to blame for the fact that it's gone awfully, but you still think it could have done, so you need to find a different scapegoat. It can't really be the European Union, so it has to be Theresa May. It's Theresa May's fault. It's all gone horribly wrong.
I would say that it's been handled in a fashion that doesn't really reflect what the goal was.
So what could have gone differently, do you think?
Well, the initial standpoint, in my opinion, should have been no deal right from the off, and then you've got two years to make a deal, which might have left us in a much better position. But
just talk me through that. 2 year, no deal. Straight from the off, and 2 years to make a deal.
Sorry, we're not going to make a deal because there is no deal here for us. We have to leave. This is what the people have chosen.
But nobody voted for no deal, and Vote Leave's own literature said we won't even think of leaving until we've got an agreement in place.
James,
pardon?
It says leave the union, leave the customs union, and leave the control of the European Court of Justice. That was on the ballot paper. That's what people voted for. That means no deal.
No, that's not really what anybody voted for. Robert. Steve, I beg your pardon. Robert's next.
Okay. Well, I voted to come out of the European Union.
So you're happy then with how it's gone? Because we're going to crash out with no deal, possibly. That would be the best case scenario for you?
Well, not really, no.
Oh.
Yes,
you're quite confused, Steve,
no
mate.
Deal,
but that's what I'm here for.
No deal as opposed to Theresa May's deal, yes, definitely.
Right.
No deal as to what could have been. Well,
so talk me what through.
Where we are.
What could have been then? This after we've done no deal and then done 2 years of negotiating a deal. What would that deal have looked like?
Personally, if I'd been Prime Minister at the time of the referendum, I would have said, right, okay, we need to start from scratch, guys. We've got to leave. We have to leave. You can see that.
But there was no mandate for that. All of the campaigning made it clear that various things were going to happen, not least that line in the Vote Leave literature that specifically said we won't even begin to leave until we've got an agreement in place. That was the official endorsed organisation. But let's not get bogged down in too many difficult facts. This deal, if you were Prime Minister, to use your own phrase, that you would have done, what would that deal have looked like that you think you'd have got the European Union to agree to?
First off, I would have started by putting a team together that could negotiate.
No. I'm asking what the deal would have looked like, not fantasy football.
Well, it would have looked like something like no deal, but then with using the 39 billion to make an incentive for both parties to get a really good deal going.
That doesn't mean anything. I've asked what the deal is, and you just said a really good one. No, but I know what economists say. All except Patrick Minford say that no deal's an absolute disaster. But you think it's a good idea. I'm wondering what your deal would have looked like.
Well, it looks something like we leave with the terms of the referendum delivered.
No, but that's nothing to do with the deal, Steve. What does the withdrawal agreement she's done that you think is rubbish because she's so disreputable? What would the deal, the alternative that could have been reasonably reached, what would it have looked like? And I don't need chapter and verse. Just give me the headlines.
I don't know, James, honestly.
And yet you rang a national radio station to say that you did. Robert's in Prestwick. Robert, what would you like to say?
I have to confess, I supported Leave.
Fair enough.
But I voted Leave, and from a Scottish perspective, I didn't like the common agricultural policy of the fisheries, but I wanted to stay in single market, freedom of movement, because they're all good, and the customs union.
When did you realise it was impossible to have those two positions simultaneously?
Well, I kind of got I realised I knew very little about what the EU actually did.
Me too.
Until I found out. And I suddenly realised, wait a minute, this is just not a good idea. And I apologise to all those people I voted leave.
You don't have to apologise. And certainly it's not your responsibility. It's the people that misled you and misinformed you. And people like Steve are still demonstrating the symptoms of that misinformation.
But what annoys me most is I hear them standing up, Farage, etc., standing up and say, this is what the people voted for. I come from Scotland. Yes. I didn't vote for an English Brexit. And
but even the people who voted to leave didn't vote for what's now being described.
Well, they all said it would be no different, it would be better. It would be,
we'd hold all the cards.
Yeah, exactly. But
the German car industry will be queuing up to do deals with us. But people like Steve, you heard Steve before you, that they have been successfully persuaded to pretend that they voted all along for this thing that's going to happen, and when you ask them how it could have gone better, they say it definitely could have done better, but I can't tell you how. And that's kind of what suits the Brexiters more than it suits those of us who inhabit reality.
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind for me. First, I always think of Theresa May and think of Profumo.
Why?
He lied and get kicked out. She lies and gets away with it.
She does. Does she lie? I'm not sure that I'm going to let that pass. I think she's economical with the actuality, but I don't think she...
Wait a minute, she did lie.
Go on.
Because she said that her deal was non-negotiable. Yeah. It could not be changed. And then she says, well, we can go and change it.
And then she says, yeah, you're absolutely right, of course.
That's a lie.
No, okay.
That's a blatant lie.
Okay, I take that back. And I think I said earlier myself, she was either lying when she explained the Irish problem before the referendum, or she's lying now. Don't be so rude. I'm the only person who's allowed to... Don't call my Prime Minister...
I apologise for that.
I don't think she is stupid. She's many other things.
Well, maybe she's... Yeah, okay, I'll
is it going to work? That's the question. Is this a...
It's not going to work. Another thing I think is really... I think if you were a negotiator, and I've negotiated, I've talked to unions, etc., first thing you don't do is actually badmouth them.
No. This is the astonishing thing, isn't it?
You don't badmouth, because they'll say, right, we're going to have all these trade agreements. If we come out of the EU, we don't have an agreement with the EU. They want then bilateral agreements with all the EU countries.
Well, they can't do that.
I know they can't do it, but would you negotiate with somebody who told you it was all your fault? And I left a golf club. I'm not allowed to play in that golf club anymore.
You might be able to pay a daily fee or something like that. I'm a big fan of these analogies, and the golf club one is quite a good one, because we're leaving the golf club, but we want to enjoy all the benefits of membership with fewer of the responsibilities. It's precisely what we've done, but I mean, he's going to take a bit of a coating, I imagine, as the totem pole of the absurd position. But old Steve there, before Robert, you heard it. That's how it works. No, it definitely could have gone better. It's all Theresa May's fault, not the EU's fault. How could it have gone better? That's the bottom line. And I think there are more Steves out there than people still appreciate. Incontrovertible evidence that you're wrong can be easily dismissed by closing your eyes, putting your fingers in your ears and singing about bendy bananas.
So let's stay with you two leavers at the end there for the time being. And David, what was it about the EU, you said in terms of regulation and taking back control, what was it about the EU that had affected your life that you felt you weren't in control of?
Democracy. We were lacking in democracy. We were being dictated to by silly things like our food, you have to have straight bananas and all this silly stuff. You have to have straight bananas and all this silly stuff. You have to have straight bananas and all this silly stuff.
Just because our PM and MPs and civil servants have made a complete horlicks of the negotiations doesn't make my decision wrong, says Chris. Well, it does, mate, because you were told this was going to happen by the people you disagreed with. So you're now agreeing with the people you used to disagree with, which means you're wrong. See? Of course, you can close your eyes, put your fingers in your ears and sing about bendy bananas until the cows come home, but it could not have gone any differently. Unless, of course, you were comfortable with freedom of movement not being abolished, in which case we wouldn't have had to leave the customs union and or the single market, and we could have secured something akin to what Norway currently enjoys, although most observers would contend that Norway's arrangements are inferior to our own. Not all, for the avoidance of doubt. Which is why that question is so important. What do you think could have gone differently? What do you think could have been secured? The simple premise since July 2016 was these are our rules. These are the 4 inseparable freedoms, okay? And you are perfectly entitled to pull out of one of them, but the minute you pull out of one of them, you pull out of all of them. And there'll be wiggle room, and there'll be a little bit of give and a little bit of take, but the bottom line will be there's no earthly way you can pull out of an organisation while not surrendering any of the benefits of membership. You just can't do it. Everything we've spent the last 2.5 years discussing has essentially been a variation on that fundamental theme. But here's the really interesting thing, and we'll get back on with the question imminently of whether or not you think Theresa May will pull it off. Her attempt to blame the European Union for failing to reopen and negotiate a deal that our last caller reminded us she insisted couldn't be reopened or renegotiated. She told Parliament that, I'm pretty sure. But I think it'll work, because for reasons I don't fully appreciate and possibly never will, so many people can't do it. It's so liberating to admit that you're wrong. It's so liberating, because all of the anger and the resentment and the stoked-up bitterness and the rage that created this Brexit vote has got worse, not better. You never meet a happy Brexiter. The only happy Brexiter you might meet would be one who, sorry, I got nothing. You never really meet a happy... Well, I suppose if you've made a ton of money out of being a prominent Brexiter, you're happy, but by definition, you couldn't give a hoot about the country or the people who live in it, even though they've paid you wages for the best part of your adult life. Then, yeah, they're probably happy, in a way happy. If you never really had any illusions about your own utter absence of integrity, I suppose you might just about be able to claim happiness. But for the rest of them, the 17.4 million, they're all more miserable and more angry than they were before. Actually, that's not fair. The ones who still think it was a good idea, or the ones who still, because they don't deep down think it is a good idea. It's all gone appallingly. It's just a question of who you're going to blame instead of yourself. There it is. We always get there in the end. Theresa May is today offering Brexiters an opportunity to blame the European Union instead of themselves. I made a mistake, which the first caller pointed out brilliantly. There is actually a third option, and that's blaming Theresa May. 2 areas of denying reality would involve it's all Theresa May's fault and it's all the European Union's fault, because the alternative for these people, who she's really talking to today, Grimsby voted 70% leave. She hasn't chosen Grimsby by accident. Although one of the first indications we received, God, it feels like so long ago. Do you remember when we found that article in the local paper? A Leave supporting Grimsby MP was already asking if the fishing industry could have some sort of special opt-out that allowed it to stay in the single market. That was within weeks of the vote. These were the moments back in the days where I thought, that looks like a buttock to me. That looks like a naked buttock. That doesn't look like a silken robe that everybody else is describing it as. An MP in Grimsby. I think that was my first moment where I thought, well, this is going to change a lot of minds. This is going to move the needle, because all they had really by then was fish and blue passports. And when a Grimsby MP was reported as seeking special exemptions from Brexit for the fishing industry in Grimsby, I kind of thought, well, people are going to wake up now, aren't they? God, I look back fondly on how naive I was. So naive and trusting in those days. So those are the 3 options. You either blame yourself for believing these idiots, you blame the European Union for, I don't really know what, but that doesn't matter because we've spent 3 years just blaming stuff without knowing why we're blaming it, or you blame Theresa May. And that's probably what she's most desperate to avoid, which is why she's trying to blame the European Union for her failure to get the deal she negotiated and got them to reluctantly agree to through her own parliament. You just couldn't make it up. Nicole's in Bracknell. Nicole, will it work?
It's going to work.
It is, isn't it?
It is. And can I just say to you,
no.
I'm coming from a sleep-deprived mum.
Oh,
so you've been following all of this with sleep. Well, imagine waking up and thinking, did this really happen?
Oh, Lord.
Has this happened?
Yes.
Is the world gone insane? Or is it just me?
Half the world's gone mad. Half the world's gone mad. Absolutely mad.
Yeah, it's unfolding each day, and you're thinking, well, actually, no, I'm sure I thought this was going to happen, and then new things happen. You think, oh.
Shall I give you an example of how mad it's gone? I'm going to read you a text from Gerald at Heathrow, okay? And then I'm going to ask you whether it is serious or a joke. Ready?
Well, I'm ready.
O'Brien, you're a Ramona idiot. Once we leave the EU with no deal, we can start telling those bullies at the WTO where they can shove it too. Joke or not joke?
It's just I think it's a little bit insane.
No,
I don't normally say that. I really don't like to make a judgment call.
No, it's not a great word to use in this context, but you haven't had much sleep, so we'll let that pass. I think Gerald is actually joking, but I'm only 60% sure.
The thing is, what's going to end up happening, this is the thought I had yesterday, is that it's always, however this ends, the EU is going to be blamed. That's going to be the final. Yes,
but that doesn't mean it will work. It doesn't mean it will work. They're going to try and blame the EU. Do you think it will work?
I think it will work because that is going to be the thought process of people.
They have to blame someone other than themselves. I mean, actually, it's not such a brilliant question after all, really, is it? Because if I'd said, are you going to blame yourself or are you going to blame anyone and anything except yourself, the answer would probably be, I'm going to blame anyone or anything except myself.
And it's easy to do, and I think the pendulum's going to swing between Theresa May and the EU because I think this whole thing has now become one.
But didn't the caller just before the break make such a perfect point when he accused her of lying, and I got all protective of the Prime Minister's reputation? She said that we cannot open this deal again. She categorically said that. I'm 99% certain he's right. Yeah. And now she's saying it's all the European Union's fault that they won't.
I mean, for Theresa May, it becomes, I think, this is just my own personal opinion, it becomes a point of moral conscience. Because the argument that she has been saying is that she is trying to deliver Brexit for the people. And she's trying to be a servant of the people and delivering which is against what she has previously believed.
We need to play that Irish clip, actually, Keith. Can you dig out the clip of her talking about the Irish border before the referendum result? Because that's really relevant today. Sorry, carry on, teacher.
I'm a teacher, and I've taught year 11s in the past. And there'll be some topics that I know will come up in the exam, but they don't want to learn it. Now I could turn around and say, well, actually, I'm here to serve you, and the best way for me to serve you is to do what you want. Or I go with what I believe is my true conviction that I can then and say, well, no, we are going to go through Pythagoras' theorem because it's on the syllabus
I'm the teacher.
It comes up.
Yeah, well, that's a fundamental breakdown of trust that you describe, actually, in that we presume politicians will act in the best interest of the country, but Brexit gave them a mandate to act against the best interest of the country, and some of them aren't bright enough to unravel that particular conundrum. I'm not sure I am either. Imagine if you were an MP in a constituency that voted leave, and you know it's a stupid thing to do. You know it's stupid for voters, but you know how condescending it is to explain it like that. When are you going back to work, Nicole?
Well, I'm going back to work in June. Okay. But they have to stand on the right... I mean, especially as the Prime Minister going through this and all the negotiations and seeing that it's going into a place that you knew... previously, really, that it might well go into this place.
Well, everybody knew. Everybody who was paying attention knew. And weirdly, giving 50% of the time and the attention and the space to people who weren't telling the truth and 50% to people who were has created the mess that we find ourselves in. And if you think I'm exaggerating, this is Theresa May herself talking about the border in Ireland before the referendum vote.
Just think about it. If we were out of the European Union with tariffs on exporting goods into the EU, there'd have to be something to recognise that between the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And if you pulled out of the EU and came out of free movement, then how could you have a situation where there was an open border with a country that was in the EU and had access to free movement?
What do you say? That's the actual Prime Minister who today in Grimsby will be saying that what that reality has delivered is all the fault of the European Union for being so intractable and intransigent. And she will stand up and say it, the vicar's daughter, with a straight face. And people like Steve in Northampton... Oh, no, he won't, because he still blames her. People like... was Gerald joking or not? I don't know. Here's a good one. I take absolute pleasure listening to your continuous moaning about Brexit and cannot wait for the day we leave. Your beloved EU... And I don't even need to tell you that there's an apostrophe in your, do I? It kind of just goes without saying. Your beloved EU isn't so great, and in a few years to come, you'll be proved so wrong, you melt. And that is the political position of the other side from the one I'm espousing this morning. On my side, facts, evidence, reality, truth. On his side, you're a melt. Oh, and in many years' time, you'll be proved wrong, And that will make up for the fact that you're being proved right every single hour of every single day since June of 2016. You know, shall I say this? I think I will. We'll soon find out. We talk about Steve Bannon meeting up with people like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg. But actually what Theresa May will do in Grimsby today is straight out of that playbook. You say the polar opposite of what you've previously said and then blame foreigners for any problems. Trump's basic political project in a nutshell there. To say simultaneously two unsustainable positions, you know, and then just put the blame on foreigners. Tell people there's a problem, tell people it's the fault of foreigners, and just trust that they will be too blinded by their own bigotries, or I don't know, to recognise that you're now saying the polar opposite of what you previously said. You know, when... I need to possibly check the dates on this, but I'm going to try and do it off the top of my head. I think it was in December, wasn't it? It was December of last year. It's only just March. So, in December of last year, I think Peston's pointed it out. Chris has just tweeted me this. I think Robert Peston's pointed this out on his superb blog. Just think about this, wherever you sit on things, whether you're still chomping or whether you've seen the light. In December, Theresa May portrayed the withdrawal agreement that she'd successfully negotiated and the concessions on the backstop that the EU had reluctantly agreed to as a resounding victory, didn't she? That was the victory in December, the reworked backstop, the fact that it would extend to the whole of the United Kingdom rather than be confined to the island of Ireland. So in December, she said, and I wish I had the tapes, she said three things, as far as I can recall. She said, this is a brilliant result for us. This can't be reopened. We can't change anything now that's in the text. And this is the best that we could possibly have done. Scratch the third, just stick with the two truths there. She said, number one, this is a resounding victory on the reworked backstop, and number two, that's it now, we won't be able to go back and change any of the text. So today, the British Prime Minister, and this is why I have so little patience with people who claim to be motivated by patriotism, because they have denuded and rendered ridiculous our country on the world stage. The British Prime Minister will be reduced today to standing up in Grimsby and trying to blame the European Union for what she claimed as a resounding victory fewer than 3 months ago. So in December, it was a massive win, and today, with absolutely nothing having changed, not a single syllable of that withdrawal agreement has been adjusted or altered in any way whatsoever. In December, it was a resounding victory, and today, it's a terrible loss that's all the fault of the people that we enjoyed that resounding victory over back in December. Do you know what? I actually have developed a little bit of sympathy for the idea that it's all Theresa May's fault. It's not true, of course. But if the alternative is blaming yourself for having believed liars, snake oil salesmen, charlatans and racists, especially when you are none of those things yourself, the alternative is to put your hand up and say, yeah, I was mugged. Given that choice, I'd probably blame Theresa May as well. Because I do genuinely think you'd have to have your head up your backside in order to think that there's anything to blame the European Union for. However, as you rightly remind me, if the last 3 years have taught us anything, it is that way more people go through life with their head up their backside than the rest of us ever realised. Paul's in Bloomsbury. Paul, what do you think? Will she get away with it?
Of course she'll get away. She'll get away up to your point, James.
Go on.
I think because, I think that people have been lied to that much, but I don't think people, the British public are stupid.
Oh.
They've been sold a patsy from day one regarding the whole Brexit nonsense. I don't think they're actually going to go through with it in the end. To tell you the truth.
The phone line's awful, Paul. I do apologise. I'm going to try and fix it up a bit for you and pick over a couple of the points that you made. But let's move on to Felix in Hampstead. I was in Hampstead the other day. What a lovely part of the world, Felix. I'm not overly familiar with it. Ask me why I was there.
Why were you there?
Oh, I was interviewing Ricky Gervais for my iTunes #1 podcast series, Full Disclosure, and that latest episode will be released on Monday. If you've got Netflix, I heartily recommend that you watch his new series, Afterlife. It's absolutely superb.
I passed Ricky Gervais walking my dog in Hampstead.
I'm told everyone in Hampstead has passed Ricky Gervais at some point in proceedings. I don't think he's got a home.
Yeah, he just walks around in circles.
Just walks around the heath looking for people. What are you ringing in? Is Theresa May going to pull it off?
Look, actually, James, I want to say something else about... I'm a psychologist, by the way, so
yes.
I can't help putting my psychology hat on.
Good.
Look, I've got to be honest. I voted for Brexit, not on the main reasons people, I think, are saying. I wasn't really listening to news. I was listening more to Facebook, which
yes.
I know is not, true, but... I was coming more from the trade deals. People saying the trade deals we got are skewed against the UK. They're not very good. They're outdated. The French are taking the mickey. Australia's queuing up and the Commonwealth is queuing up. And they sort of presented it in a way.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, if I'm a juror, I'm expecting, the prosecution and defence to make a good case. It sounds like a good case for better trade. I mean, that was my basis.
Fair enough.
Now
My cleverest friend voted for Brexit. I've mentioned this a few times in the past, and his position, I mean, he wasn't informed by Facebook so much, but it is not dissimilar from yours. The problem was, as you know that I'm about to say, you couldn't have done any of that without abolishing freedom of movement, which I sense you wouldn't have wanted to do if you were given a straight choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going on something, so I don't have time to spend all my time. I'm very busy, to look at the facts. I'm saying these are the facts.
That's our job. Our job was to give you the facts.
Well, exactly. So I know the media is going to put a slant. You think, well, the prosecutor's probably not saying everything they know, but 70% may be on track because they're ethically obliged, and if they get found out, there's a problem. So. But you realise if new evidence comes, DNA now says that the prosecution's case was, exonerated, then you go with that. The wise thing is to go with new information rather than just get entrenched.
Yes.
So, I'm saying I didn't do it out of insanity. I did it because based on the limited facts that I could research at the time, a good case was presented.
Fair enough.
That now doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I'm
such a nasty piece of work. I don't even want to let you get away with that. You're saying it because you're still floating the boat that it might have happened. On what possible planet is a trade agreement with 50 million people something that someone's going to be more tempted by than a trade agreement with 500 million potential customers?
Well, I'm admitting my naivety that, if I researched it properly and thought about it and asked people, is this how it works?
Yes.
They might say, well, no, it doesn't really work that way. As bad as France is and the deals we got.
Imperfect and flawed everywhere. But that was the miracle of Leave, was that they actually tried to sell perfection and dreams. Well, in fact, what the Remain side should have done was acknowledge flaws and imperfections, but point out realities. Do you think Theresa May's attempt today to blame everything on the European Union will ultimately succeed? Because I'm a bit torn on this. I think it might. As a psychologist, I'm particularly interested in your answer.
Out of it.
But as a psychologist, will people rather believe something that deep down they know not to be true than admit that they've made a mistake, as you've managed to do yourself?
Well, but I've got training. I mean, most people, when you present something in their face, they get actually more entrenched in views.
They do. I know they do.
With the weapons of mass destruction, when they did the survey, and they said, well, actually, there's no evidence for it, people believed it even more. A certain population said, well, they're just lying, it's a conspiracy. They actually got more entrenched in the views that weapons of mass destruction were there.
That's a great example, a great precedent to use, because I was on the wrong side of that one, and it was when they failed to find any that the first seeds of doubt and denial began to creep in. So I think I'm with you. They will. I
believed it too. I believed it. Oh God, they've got these things. They're going to cause world war. We should go and intervene. Oh, they haven't got these things. I mean, I can't go there personally and research it. I have to go on.
On what they tell us, yes, and I guess in this case, the government did tell us that it was all going to be disastrous, but of course the liars and the charlatans were describing that as Project Fear. Oddly, just because Iraq comes up a lot, and my first episode of Full Disclosure with Tony Blair, which is currently #1 in the iTunes chart, addresses this issue directly. I don't think it's 20/20 hindsight, but I think quite a lot of us are ignored retrospectively in that debate. It wasn't the weapons of mass destruction that persuaded me that it going into Iraq again for the second Gulf War was the right thing to do. It was that I used to say to you, I think, if you had 10 murderous dictators lined up against the wall and you've only got one bullet, what are you going to do? I thought there was a rationale for taking out one, even if you couldn't take out the other 9, because people at the time said, why aren't we invading North Korea? Why aren't we going into Iran? I was wrong on that, but it wasn't, I'm afraid. I can't use the weapons of mass destruction story as an excuse or a fig leaf for my own error. I was just wrong. I got caught up in a bloodthirsty national festival that in retrospect I can't quite believe, which is how Brexiters will feel soon.